Okay, thank you very much. The topic is governance of AI, but I would like to start with some probably reflection. First of all, is that technology has changed the nature and the balance of power forever. Not only between some countries that can have unique access to elements, technology, capabilities like rare earths or design of chips, but also to non-governmental players like big tech that have even more power than some states. And we must understand that this inequality in the balance of power, because if we want to regulate that, we must understand who are the agents. This is somehow different than the first waves of digitalization. Probably people from the Silicon Valley pretended to build a world beyond the natural frontiers and legislation of countries. When we were thinking about terms of terms of conditions or the cookies, they were more powerful than some constitutions. And when people were thinking about the metaverse, they were thinking about a world where that laws that were in the parallel world would apply. But these companies are no longer in that utopia because they have become critical infrastructure. And it's then when more than ever, the digital companies are more dependent than the government than it was in 1 decade ago. We're thinking that they were influencing governance. And I think now there's a total alignment between public interest and private interest, and they both need each other's more than ever. In the particular case of AI companies are being the key element for a geopolitical battle. In this particular case, as you know, every side of the Pacific, between especially US and China, who are fighting for the world's AI supremacy. Why do we need the AI supremacy? Because thanks to the AI supremacy, they will have the economic supremacy and the military supremacy, and not necessarily in this order. There's some difference anyway in the way US and China are approaching these AI rates, as I see. China, as always, is obsessed in controlling the market, in controlling the production means, and in controlling the industry. So they're invested a lot in applications. They want to be the leaders of electronic vehicles because they are the leaders in the batteries and the photo cells, on the energy of the future, and in green hydrogen. And they have the highest number of robots in the world and applications in all industries. The US, however, is prioritizing reaching superintelligence, which has much more deep implications than the battle for economy itself. And I think these two ways to approach that make a lot of differences that we must be aware of. Why do we need to regulate AI? Precisely because, as the professor said before, we aim that the benefits of AI are equally distributed, that there are no winners and losers beforehand. But in order to have equality on the benefits, we need to ensure equality in the access. Therefore, we need to ensure equality in the three main components of this AI, which is data, computing, and talent. Everything we know about AI has been developed in the global north with data from the global north and computing capabilities from the global north. So in the UN advisory body, first question is, why do we need to govern AI at the global level? And the first conclusion is that people mix three concepts that are interlinked, but they are not the same. People all the time are mixing ethics, regulation, and governance. I cannot talk about ethics here. You are the best experts, but ethics sometimes is used by companies as an excuse to say, you don't need to regulate me because I already have an ethical code of conduct. Unfortunately, ethics do not generate any guarantees. They do not generate any rights. The important thing is governance. What are the instruments we need to put in place to ensure that companies, developers, users, that can be other companies, that can be governance, are making an ethical use of this technology? And for that, we can use regulation. Regulation is one instrument of governance, but it's not the only one. We can have governance through regulation, through market incentives, through oversight, from accountability, transparency. So the first really comprehensive attempt on regulating AI at European, as you know, is the European AI Act, which I had the privilege to be the leading negotiator. We're talking about the battle of the narrative. Europe clearly is losing the total battle of the narrative because people saying that Europe is regulating AI and this is the cause because we are not competitive or innovative. So this is a plain lie. We are not regulating AI. The European AI Act does not regulate AI. It only regulates the high-risk use cases of AI. And that's a very significant difference. In parallel, we have also 150 regulations in the US regulating AI in vertical sectors, different from country to country. And Europe has a comprehensive effort to have one rule for the 7 members. I think that the European AI Act was a very, very interesting attempt to regulate the high risk use cases. Nobody was against it. Not even the lobbies were against the EU AI right in the high risk use case. The problem became when we were asking for transparency in the general purpose models and systems. That's called the LLMs. That's where all the lobby pressure right. The question is, when I'm asking for transparency because we are not regulating the LLMs, what you want to be sure is that they are not propagate systemic risks and they not pose a risk for fundamental rights. So when you're asking for transparency and there's this huge opposition against bringing you that transparency, the question is, what are you hiding? And that's the question we need to say. Why are you hiding? Are you hiding that you're using copyrighted material? Are you hiding that you are introducing bias? Are you hiding that you, in fact, are having a risk in the fundamental right? That is where the question, really the importance of it is. On the other side, the European AI Act, for me, it's more than a legal standard or a technical standard, it's a moral standard. Because for the first time ever, we define what are the forbidden uses of AI. And that is very important because we're saying not everything that's technically feasible must occur. And for example, there are 5 use cases which are forbidden. Number 1, social scoring, like in China. In China, they accept or have no other choice to accept social scoring. But we say, even though that's technically feasible, we don't want this to happen in Europe. Predictive policing, some use case that is accepted in the US, we say, okay, even though this is technically feasible, we don't want this to happen in Europe. Facial recognition in open spaces by governments that leads to surveillance and classification. We don't want this to happen in Europe. Use of AI technologies to manipulate human mind. We don't want this to happen in Europe. I think that's important that we take it into account. It's important that we say technology is not inevitable. We need to put limits to technology, and that is why we need regulation. Of course, it's not the only tool. We need governance. And in the effort of having a global governance of AI, because of course regulations can change from market to market, and every company and every country will decide what are the limits of that. But there must be some common ground at the global level. And that's a very bare minimum, which is everything we do with AI should align with international order, the UN Charter, human rights. And based on that, we didn't position UN as a global regulator of the world. We say we need to bring all the people together because when we were asking ourselves the question, do we really need to regulate AI globally? We found that there is a clear global governance deficit in AI in 3 aspects. Lack of inclusion, as I said, only 7 countries in the world were present in all the conferences, 118 were not present in any one. There is no single hyper supercomputer in the world in the global south. No diverse data has been introduced to train these models. And of course, there is no accessibility to this data quality and compute that are able to generate ecosystem. The second is a lack of total transparency. These are black boxes. Why? Because they were not developed in the academia. Why they were not developed in the academia? Because the academia didn't have the talent or the funding? No, because they didn't have access to massive amounts of data. So that was only in the hands of private companies. So based on the data monopolies, we're having the AI monopolies, and the AI monopolies now can lead to any monopoly in the vertical if we don't regulate this monopoly. Just to conclude, we issued six recommendations for the global governance of AI that were approved on the last digital compact in the UN GA on last year. But in this General Assembly in the UN, 2 of these important mechanisms are already in place. First one, and it's important in this scientific community, which I encourage you to apply for, is an international independent scientific panel for AI. In the same way, the IPCC panel was for climate change. Until we don't have data and scientific evidence, we cannot illustrate public policy. So we need an independent scientific panel. So we all agree on what are the opportunities and are the risks. There's a call for applications ending October 21st. 40 members will have be part of this international scientific panel. The only requisite is that no more than 2 nationals, the same nationality, will part of the panel. So really to ensure inclusion from global north, global south. And the second instrument is an AI policy dialogue where all the countries with the same weight can discuss on regulatory alignment, standards alignment. Last reflection, just to finish, let me an additional 1 minute, is that let me come back to the beginning. I was talking about regulation and governance. Let me talk back to ethics. I think we must aware that this new digital Rerum Nova, whatever, Rerum Novarum, will have to introduce new ethical frontier. For me, there are three important areas some have been discussed. Neuro rights, the right to mental privacy. I think we should treat brainwave data not as any other biometrical data, but as a human organ, because it has to do with our identity. Second, boundaries for digital personas. We are launching sociopaths in the world. Digital people are sociopaths, are entities who simulate emotions, who make you think they love you, they make you think they're empathy. That's all. Last one, environmental sustainability of AI.